Excellent. So we look forward to that. And then October, the actual training is CDMP certification. We do have training in Riyadh. Paul, I was just wondering if you wouldn't mind helping us update the slide in terms of the public training in Riyadh. So that will be happening in person. Fantastic. All right. And then what we do have is data modeling, the different types of training. If you're interested, data modeling, data quality, data architecture, meta and master data. And if anybody's interested, we were approached by Mark Atkins. Remember, he did business definitions. He and Terry Smith worked together on building business definitions and have done some fantastic work in terms of data warehousing and KPIs and getting the right language. And they really have a nice structured way of writing business definitions. And they've asked if we would like to share their and present their material. So if anyone's interested, we'd love to hear about that, and we can share that with you. I'm sure you guys battle like me, battling with writing all these definitions for all the entities and relationships and all those type of things. So okay, so we'll look forward to that. Fantastic. Okay, so Esti, would you take over and present?
I will. Let me just quickly move a couple of things.
Cool. So just as a very quick reminder in terms of, it's always important to know where we're coming from in order to appreciate where we're going to. So this series started in July in terms of introducing the data value driven way. And there we introduced two assets, not just the data product, but also the data management process. And it's been really exciting in the last couple of weeks. We've been dealing with clients, highlighting to them to see their data management process as an asset that if they develop a habit amongst their team, that can be leveraged for scale. So that's where we were in July. We introduced you to the data value driven way. It's got an ideation process which kicks off use cases, and then you go through, depending on the type of playbook, you can either do an offensive or a defensive type playbook, and there you would be using different amounts of the different data domains in order to get to an executable data product that your client or your business values. And so we spent a lot of time walking you through there, but one of the key take homes there is that you use each of the data domains in a sequence in order to deliver value through the data product. So that was July. Then in the next month in August, we realized that it was really important to not lose sight of the fact that our data value operational mechanism lives within the context of the governance of the alignment to business value. And you'll remember Howard really worked hard on us in the month of August for us never to lose sight of how one goes about aligning to the business's transformation, or there could be a digital transformation, could be a technical transformation, could even be a data strategy, could be a business strategy. But what is key is that if you need to negotiate and decide on the mechanism of valuation prior to launching in and executing, so that business is taken along and is not surprised by a discussion on value after a delivery has been made. Very important. And there we went through aligning the value, defining the value, finding the value, and driving the value. So that was August, and it's a really important kind of Howard, as far as I'm concerned, a really kind of pivotal part of the year, to just highlight to all of the members how important it is to align on the value statement. And then we decided in the month of September to make it really practical.
Sorry, JJ, before I go off here, I just wanted to, I really enjoyed Rob Jackson's comment today on LinkedIn to say how amazing it was to listen to Doug Laney and map that to the value within the organizations, almost to dial into that value compass that he had. And so I just wanted to get your views on, Doug has his way in terms of finding the value, and how does this JJ, how would you map this to the approach that Doug presented yesterday?
So Howard, it's interesting that you asked that. Is I actually posed a question to Doug with respect to like where is he getting his taxonomy from, or like how like what air cover is he giving himself to make sure that when he does enter into a valued discussion with business, it is not on a flimsy foundation. And it's almost as if he you know, you can see that on his spreadsheets, he's quite particular about landing value, and you can see there was a need to articulate return on investment and a couple of the fundamental attributes. But Howard, where I find that starting to become tricky is when I have when we have different types of use cases. Some of the use cases depend on an efficiency gain, which sometimes battles to talk through an ROI. It would much rather talk through a percentage of a percentage saving that is based on execution and not so much on investment. And so Howard, I found maybe he was just rushed, but I found the yellow bar in this value proposition. I found that quite I couldn't see it. So it might have been there, but I couldn't see it.
I think you're right. And what he did say was he saw that compass. His answer was, and I think you were, because you were driving, I think you may have missed some of his feedback. His answer was he actually saw someone in Gartner present something like this on a compass.
Okay.
And he thought, that's a nice way of connecting and visualizing what this use case was all about. But you are right. He doesn't have a structured taxonomy, but what he does do is those spreadsheets. And he even said that's probably going to be his next book in terms of how the business would structure that business case or benefit analysis or costing type of scenario. So he's actually saying that they've come up with 14 or 15 different types of costing mechanisms to bring that out. But it's a case of, and I think I heard this morning from someone in Botswana, it was Harare, that they actually said they had done the costing, they had driven the value, and then the auditor said we don't accept your calculations. And so they had to go back to the drawing board. So it was an interesting experience. And Kareem has his hand up. Kareem, any feedback from your side? You were also on the session yesterday.
Yes, I've been doing for quite some time comparative study between intellectual property and data. And a lot of the valuation tools used for data are actually used for IP, like discounted cash flow. Because, and one of the things I wanted to raise yesterday, but I didn't have the chances. Data is a lot like trade secrets. Okay, they don't. They're not fixed in a tangible medium of expression, or they're not really a brand or a patent or a design. They're just fluid like trade secrets, and as long as they're secrets, they're still valuable. And the methods used for trade secret are basically discounted cash flow, not raw. So I think at some point there will be a strong analogy between trade secrets and data valuation, because they're of a very similar nature. I just wanted to point that out.
Right, but I think, Kareem, if you agree with me, and I'm glad you've had a similar type of thing, that almost the way in which you measure and define the calculation on IP, there almost needs to be a set of accepted principles that this is the right way of doing it. If that's maybe that's what we're sort of trying to say.
Yes, they're using on IP, the most favorable valuation is the discounted cash flow, because the IP appreciates. So if, for example, if you acquire the Pepsi brand now, it goes into your balance sheet with the same amount that is valued at the time. So if it's 1 million, it goes into your balance sheet for 1 million. But then it sits on your balance sheet for 1 million while the appreciation goes on a daily basis from royalty, from licensing, from etc. So at some point, data is very similar to the same concept, and you have to apply the discounted cash flow because of the appreciation value and not the fixed value. And that's my humble understanding. I'm not an
Sure.
economist or finance guy.
Fantastic. All right. Sorry, JG.
No, not at all. I think that, thank you so much, Karim, and that's fascinating. I made a note of that. Thank you for sharing that. And then, so Howard, I think we've got the DVD way, and then we've realized that we needed to come back to value and make sure that we are not losing sight of value at any point. And that was August, and then September was a recognition that a key anchor point through the DVD way is the data quality assessment. And why it's a key anchor point is it both informs forward and backward.
Yeah.
So it informs forward in terms of you can actually mock up your BIA analytics, but then you put a condition of use relative to your data score. And equally, what I found interesting is when you score your quality at your time of implementation, it immediately starts to inform the feasibility, which you did earlier on at that use case level, to make sure that you are actually you've got the correct technical feasibility in place. So this DQ step was such a powerful lever to inform both forward and back, and that's where we decided to just shine a light on it in September. And Esty, I'm to see what you've done, because you're actually going to walk us through a practical example of how you've made this DQ come alive for a client. So I'm going to hand it back to you guys now. I think that's how we are. That's how we've got to where we are. And it's really exciting. I mean, just think back of where we were 1 quarter ago. A lot of this thinking, wasn't available for debate. And so, and I think it's important is that this is not this is an approach that needs to be refined and interrogated as we go. So I'm hoping that there'll be lots of questions coming from today's session. So over to you.
Thanks, JG. All right. So, okay. So we do have the essential concepts, and we felt that we don't really need to go through those essential concepts again. So what I am going to do is actually go to the professionals, and I think we'd like to just get through this section at the moment. So if you bear with me, so we've done data management, we did data citizens. If you remember that again, JG looked a lot at using those box plots and understanding what the right CDEs are and what the reasonableness in all those different types of checks. And how important it was to have data citizens on the game as part of DQ to start to define the rules and to start looking at some level of analysis. So that was quite something, and that's been an amazing journey. And now we go into the data professional. So what we've done here, and just to give you some background, we put together a data quality for certification course that helps us go through quality, and it's a very practical course. So the first day is all the theory. The second day is actually delivering the appropriate data quality assessment artifacts. What would you do in an assessment, and how would you do it? So that's what we'll be doing today, and so that includes everything from the DQ business rules, what the expectations are, how do we get the data sets in, how do we model for data quality, and how do we present it? And that's what Esty is going to take us through at the moment. So Esty, all yours.
Am I taking it over from you?
Yes, you can.
It should be there now.
Yes, it is.
Okay, cool. So data quality. So a big thing is the relationship between the data quality dimensions and the data quality concepts. So you might be familiar with the dimensions. So certain things like consistency, accuracy, and then there's also underlying concepts, which is more detailed. So for example, format consistency, logical consistency. So a lot more detail on that. And then the third level that we have is the actual metric on how we will measure that specific concept. And then how all of that fits together into a data model. So I like data modeling. So drew a picture of it so that in my head, I know where everything is connected and where everything links to. And so this was helpful for me to understand how the DQ rules fit together. And now, to set up the actual DQ rules, you need a couple of things. So one big thing that everybody, I'm assuming, in data almost knows, there's a lot of discussion with business and with users. And that's our primary place of almost getting this data rule, to talk with the business system specialist, business, the data owner, the data steward, and understand their pain points for us to understand, okay, what type of problems do they have? Even if they aren't phrasing it in a DQ jargon almost, as long as we can talk to them, gather their pain points, and then what we want to do is translate that into DQ rules that we can apply. And then when you have the DQ rules, you then have some more additional conversations to determine what their expectations are, to determine, do we want this attribute for completeness? Should it always be there? How critical is it? How important is that? So we as data professionals definitely have an interpretation of how critical we think certain items are or should be, but it's very important that we have that discussion with business because they are working with the data. So they might know in a lot of cases, different scenarios where something could be valid or invalid. So setting up the actual rules. So this can be done initially, do this in Excel. To have it set up like this is where you start. The pain points, I'm not sure if you can see my cursor if I move.
Yes, I can.
Okay. So the pain points.
There's a pointer on PowerPoint if you want to try that, Esti. Like a little red. There you go.
Okay. So you start at this point, at the pain points in the description with the users, as that will be the starting point and the guide for all the rules that you set up. This won't be so neatly described when you have the conversations, but you will convert it into a business rule. So you will listen for certain keywords that they might use to say, this field is sometimes blank, and we're expecting a value. The correct values aren't there, even when they should be. So you'll document all of that, and then from the pain points, have a bit of more DQ, specialist time, and then go determine, okay, what is the dimension that we want to cover? Is it for completeness? Is it accuracy? Is it consistency? What is this pain point all about? Also then identify the underlying concept to just get some more detail on what it is that we are looking to check with the specific DQ rule. The CDEs, so this is a very nice link that quite neatly describes the business, the DQ dimensions and the underlying concepts. We have to apply it to a specific CDE, so critical data elements. So you might have heard all about, since talking about the DVD way, is it's all about the critical data elements and the use case. So we are only applying it to these set amounts of critical data elements. Even though there are other elements in the table that might also be problematic, these are the ones we are focusing on. So that would be applied to a specific critical data element. And then there's a measurement state. And this is the discussion with shareholders. How critical or how important is it if something is wrong in this specific field? Is it critical, or does it only require a warning to warn us to say this looks odd, investigate this? Or do we actually say, stop, don't use this field for reporting? And that's where we're going to end up off with, is there actual reporting actions on how we can use DQ to recommend if somebody should be using a value or not. This DQ expectations, yes,
and
Howard.
Maybe just to take a little further, it can also extend to the fact that because we have CDEs, and CDEs are so the report is based on those CDEs. If one falls below a certain level, you may even say that this report at the moment is suspect and not to be used because it doesn't have the right level, especially when it applies certain calculations based on whatever that may be. We may have a problem with the entire report. So we've also got to understand that it could knock the whole report out, not just a data element.
Yes. So the entire report, and then we should be able to say to the CDO or whoever is presenting, this report is not sound to make decisions on. That's the type of level that we're going for, saying, stop, don't use this report. Because it is critical for them to know if they are making a recommendation on something, that it is based on good data quality. And that's why we're doing the specific approach to be able to give that type of feedback. This data quality expectations for the minimum and maximum, this is also a discussion with the stakeholders. So you'll see the majority of items that we're doing is discussion based with them to find out. So like it's the part of the value discussion, we need to make sure that there's value included. The same is true for this. We need to make sure that by the time we present something, all the stakeholders are involved. They have given the input to say, this is a very important field and it needs to be exactly correct. So the minimum and maximum of what is acceptable, as well as the rule state, which is just to say at the moment it's in definition. Eventually it will move to measuring if we're actually using it. And an option could be retired. So eventually it might be a rule that's no longer required because business requirements moved on, but we want to keep track that we have tracked that rule in the past. So what do I need as a professional? So I need a couple of items. The DQ expectations, which is a lot of things we went through now, the dimensions and concepts, the CDE list, and then the business rules that we now set up. We need representative source data sets. So either you need access to the data or you need a sample set. So this will determine where you work, how access can be acquired, if it's possible, not possible. But this is very important. So this step, although one step, can take a long time. So if you already know what type of data you need or what system it is, and there's a lot of red tape involved with applications for systems or extracts, start doing that early. We also need accuracy reference data. So if we have something that will be a reference set, so let's say, for example, a list of countries or a list of the ISIC codes, we need to have that list as well. So that would be another input checklist. Okay, now what we do firstly when we get the data. We want to be able to, so this approach, we specifically want to be able to give them feedback quite quickly. And this is where the training was particularly good for me. I typically want to have a very structured approach and something that is almost built. So my immediate thought was database. Building it in a database, getting it working, scripts running, ingestion files. That was my initial thoughts. And just with some discussions with Howard, we need that feedback. In general, the client needs that feedback quite quickly. So the first round, at least, or the first couple of rounds when introducing data quality, is we need to be able to give very quick feedback. And the data profile is one item that we can give quite good feedback on and quite quickly. So if you have everything on your checklist, you import it to a profiling tool or like Power BI, you remove all the non-critical data elements. This is very important to not distract from the critical data elements that we'll be working on, because there could be other fields that are also incomplete. But if they're there, every time you discuss an output, you need to say that, oh, we will not be looking at this field. You want to avoid that type of discussion and just focus on the ones we're actually looking at. You want to assign the data types to the CDEs. Now, we already know that, let's say this data type, we know that this data type should be an integer, but it's possible that somebody might have filled in some digits in there. So as soon as you get an error, what we do, we don't edit that original file. We copy that column and call it DQ underscore the column name. And then we make all the transformations or changes that we need to make in order to continue. But somebody can always refer back to what the original data was that we got from the system. And then for each of the CDEs, we calculate the min, max, the average, the standard deviation, the count of rows, null counts, distinct counts. And there's a very nice script that you definitely save on your Notepad++ and just change a few parameters.
So I think there's a great question from Rob, and I think you've answered it, and I just wanted to check with Rob. So Rob's question was, is it possible to add attribute to the live data, or is this extract for a specific purpose? So I think there's two parts to it. Rob, what we're doing is, yes, we have the use case. So the extract is for the ability to deliver the use case. If, for example, we don't have all the information, and a good thing that ST brought in was, if we were to standardize it on ISIC, which is the industry sector codes, we couldn't possibly get that data from the authoritative source. And in this case, it was the Saudi Authority for Statistics. We would bring that data set in, and then we almost have a hierarchical structure to roll up the industry sectors. So you can be comparing bakeries to this, to that, to whatever it is. So we're looking at rental prices for the within a region, within a city. What is the business? What business is happening according to the industry standard for industry sectors? Rob, does that answer your question?
It does. It does. Thank you very much. I was just question one before the next slide.
Right, and what is helpful is a situation of, I think Essie was very right in saying, stick to your CDEs and actually remove all the data that's not part of your CDEs. So the quicker you get rid of it, the less distraction you get into, and having discussions about other elements that are not appropriate. That was a very important point, and it's really important to filter everything down to just to the important elements. Thanks, ST.
Cool. So the output can look something like this. So then you visualize the output, because just seeing a bunch of numbers is not always useful for everybody. So see that, apply some conditional formatting, and you can give pretty good feedback already on just, okay, how many null percentages are there in certain fields? What is the minimum, maximum? And especially if you have a conversation with the data owner or data stewards or just business in general that understand what these numbers need to be, they just from the min and the max, they would probably be able to tell you something might be off. Look at this. So this might even bring more rules to the front that we can still add if they aren't there already. But this is really quick feedback. And during the course, I was super surprised at how quick you can actually get this feedback. So this is really valuable. And with it being able to display it visually, it's nice. It can be used in any level of conversation to immediately give quick feedback on DQ. Now we need to apply the DQ rules. So we set up the rules to say completeness apply to this specific CDE. This is what we're aiming for. This is why. So you have a couple of steps. You want to isolate all the CDEs into their own tables. How you do that? Pretty much you create a reference to the main table. And then next one. So isolate the fields into their own tables. Copy the main table, you create a reference on the main table as opposed to creating a duplicate. And then you group by the CDE you want to create. While you're doing this, you're already adding one DQ helper field, which is DQ count. So you add it and you immediately get quick feedback to see, oh, are there duplicates in this data set? Is there not duplicates? But this is the first DQ helper field that you get. When you've done all the isolating of all the CDEs, you want to create some additional helper fields. So you will look at what type of DQ rules do you have. So if you have completeness rules, you might want to check how many nulls there are. If you have an integrity rule, to check for uniqueness. The DQ count is a good helper field to help you with that. Then you have a DQ length, which can help check for completeness, as well as format consistency. If we know this field needs to be 10 digits long, length is a very good first initial check. The next one is the one where if we have the ISIC reference data, to add DQ FK keys. So this is for referential integrity. So the underlying concept is the values are in a specified domain. It's the domain of predefined values. So this is another helper field. And then you can also add DQ row ID, which helps with integrity. So these are the ones, it is very possible that in your rule set, there might be more additional ones, but these are the ones that we found to be the most globally helpful. So you still have to look at your data set, not just add all the helper fields because it's helper fields, and see what you want to accomplish with them. Each of these you save. So one CDE might have 3 different rules. So you will save it 3 times in specific groupings to help you later be able to sort through them and get to them quickly. So this is to say, okay, the new fields, and instead of calling the field whatever the CDE value is, it's important that you then just name the field CDE value, because later on we want to aggregate all those tables, and then you need the columns to be the same, the column name to be the same. Then we create the assessments of the DQ rules. So this is where we append all the tables into one, which is why it's important that that field column be called CDE value. We add an index and an additional column for the assessment output. The next step that we want to do is we want to add the error counts. So we want to create the summary. What this in essence does is we want to count all the errors for each specific business rule. So we want to know, okay, if we are checking completeness, we are checking it, okay, the length is not 0 for that field. All right, there are 20 violations for that. So we need to know, okay, there's 20 violations for that specific business rule, but there might be more for a different one. So we want to add all these errors into a summary table. And we can use the very, very handy group by function that we used for the initial CDE tables as well. And then we want the main output that we want to be able to communicate and give to people would be the DQ reporting action outputs. So how you then create that is you combine the DQ rules table with the summary table. So the summary table contains the number of errors that you have, and that's the one you're looking for. So you need total row count, number of errors, and then to determine the error rate. What this does is this helps us to check, is this an acceptable error rate given our DQ expectations of min and max? So this goes back to, what did the user say? How important is this? So even though I might want, in my head, data quality needs to be perfect. This needs to be perfect all the time. That's not practical. And it's also not actually required. We need to just make sure that the data quality is at the level that is required for business. So we will check if that is an acceptable rate, looking at the minimum and maximum. And then we look at the measurement state. So for certain things that are critical, there will be a different type of output to something that will just display a warning. And the final output looks like, in this line, the DQ action report, where you have the critical data element, you have the dimension, the concept, the counts, error rows count, what the minimum is. The quality level shows how much how it compares to the min and max. And the reporting action then says what you should be doing about this. So in this case, the critical data element product, we are saying in terms of completeness, you should stop reporting on it. You need to stop looking at that report because the data quality is not of such a level that you can trust it. As well as for the ISO codes. Certain things continue, other items is use with caution. So look at it, see what the report says, does it make sense, but you don't necessarily need to stop using it. So the stop action is quite important to know then what this implies. And then what JG, for example, discussed last week about the impact analysis is then to show that you can almost later do at a later point and show why this is a stop. Show the difference of if this field was populated with the average, for example, how much of an influence would that have? But for now, this is a very nice, quick feedback that you can already give on a use case. Howard, I believe this is where I hand over to you.
Yes, thank you very much.
Cool.
So I'm really impressed. You really got a good understanding, Mohammed. Yes. So.
Yeah, thank you so much, Easty, for this great experience and presentation knowledge. And it was very valuable to me to focus on the CDEs, and it's very important also for the profiling. Very, very important to have the profiling for the data. And we usually do this, but not in this kind of maturity level, focusing on data quality. But at the end, also, we provided the management a kind of a dashboards or scorecards for this specific of element they are focusing on to improve the data quality. So we have designed the dashboards that have like the percentage of the invalid data and the percentage of the valid data, and the management usually see these dashboards a weekly basis to see what the trend analysis of improving this quality of data. I just wanted to mention this is our experience, and thank you so much for your useful information.
Yeah, Mohammed, you're 100% correct. What we are showing right now, and it's actually quite a nice discussion that we should take later on, is to almost look at how there's been improvements of data quality over time, so we can actually show that we're getting better. I think that's a very important message that you bring about. So it's not just about the current profile or the current state, it's also about, are we getting better, or have we had a spike or a drop in quality? Has there been some critical improvements or some critical degradations? Very, very valid, important comment. Okay. Esty, thank you. So what I did want to show you, and Mohammed brought out a great point, is what I'm showing you doesn't have the trend, which should be part of it, but what I'm trying to bring here is almost saying that for every business dashboard or data product that you have, somewhere you would need to have a profile of the critical data elements, and then almost a quick visualization in terms of a histogram of the data elements so that people can select on certain areas and then see what the data looks like. And I'm sure you notice as I clicked on that, can you see all the 0 annual rentals? And so we've got some challenges with respect to that, but we can see the distribution of the contract start date. Notice when we look at the distribution on the contract end date, we're saying sort of the end date is sitting, a lot of it sitting in 2040, which makes sense, almost a 20-year rental from 2020. But we do have a large distribution. So if most of the contracts started in 2020, we should, and there's a consistent end date, then we should be able to ask questions there as well in terms of the reasonableness of the contract end date. Then we've got land area, and there's an interesting CDE and annual rent, and JG shared quite a bit of that as well. So just a quick ability to look at the state of these CDEs. And then, as ST said, this is almost the final step where we say, oh, what's the actual quality level of a specific CDE within a specific DQ dimension. So here we can see we've actually got 72%, 72, 73% that's null in terms of our product levels, and the quality level is then 27%. Because it's critical, we then recommended that you stop using this element. Okay. So what we are presenting is to say that this stuff should be part of all of your dashboards, all of your reports, so that when people look at the business report, they can also look and be reminded of what the state of the data quality is as they progress. Okay, so hopefully we're seeing there that this is almost a habit that we should have. It should never stop. It should be there all the time. Every single time they look at the business data, they should be able to look at the quality of the business data and what they're making their decisions on. Okay, now what I did want to show you, and JG, this is for you as well, is we actually got a new set of files. We got a new set of files last night. And I started doing this work around about 1 o'clock this afternoon, and I was able to finish to get to all the reports, to all that level of within almost 2 hours that we were able to get there. And so please, it is possible and it is capable to get to that level pretty quickly. I know when ST does a final automation, this should even be faster. But when we're trying to circle around with the business and point out the challenges we're facing with certain data elements, then it's helpful to have something like this available. Okay, so what I wanted to just show you is just some steps that we apply, almost like a recipe. This is what I call a technical use case description. JG described a business use case, and the use case was basically to allow partners to examine the economic activity in an industrial city by industry sector for the partners that they're working on and by period. Now, I'm sure when you hear that description, and I've reworded it in terms of from a technical point of view, and I'm using that specific by because we know when we do data modeling for a dimensional model, the first question we ask is, what questions should the data mart be able to answer? And you express it in this type of approach. If you've done the Steve Hoberman course or any of the data modeling with us, you would be comfortable with expressing that out. Now, what I wanted to show you is if we then watch this now, we go from here and now we start highlighting our CDEs. Economic activity, industrial city, industry sector, partner, period. There are my CDEs. That's how we got our list of CDEs. And I'm hoping that you'll appreciate that in comparison to going through all sorts of stuff and trying to work out what our CDEs are, this is quite a quick way of getting to what you need to get to. So this will be part of, now that period is the contract start date and end date. So you'll see more CDEs than the 5 over here. And what's also helpful here is to then rank the importance of these CDEs. Okay, so one thing one would share was, sure, economic activity, that would be some of our most important, one of our most important CDEs, right? That's what you're really trying to do, is assess what the economic activity has been. So for example, if a partner was bad, the CDE was bad, we could still use economic activity. But if we had bad economic activity, we say, well, shucks, could this report even be used? Because the most important critical data element is suspicious or suspect at this point in time. Okay, so that helps us sort of give an understanding of what impact the falling below the expectations has. So the step that I use these set of steps. I import the data, I get my data sets in, I do a DQ profile as quickly as possible, as Esty said, so we can start with some of the discussions. We then start reducing everything to the CDEs. We don't want to have any other discussions. We then add the helper fields. We add the helper visualizations or the visualizations of the helper fields, and then we can start doing the rule assessment. Okay. So here was the first step. Basically, that was the first Power BI that I brought out. These are the actual names of what was there. I haven't removed any of them, and I've got the profile out, but then the very next step is to get rid of all of that other stuff. So here's my new profile. And in this, interestingly enough, JG, this is on the right, this is on the brand new data set. One can see to an extent, we've still got the null, the high level of nulls in annual rent, which is our economic activity. Okay. Fortunately for us, we were able to use the land area to help us recalculate a price per square meter and to get a better representation or an alternative view of viewing the data that we're looking at. But can you see how quickly we've been able to get to one of the things that was important, JG, was having unique contract numbers. We don't want duplicate contract numbers, 100%. We didn't want an overlap of land numbers. That's almost like a GPS location that we had. We can connect land numbers to the GIS database. Then, sorry, JG?
I'm just saying nice. You know, this is, you know, Howard, what we're seeing here is this incremental approach means that we were quickly able to get back to the client. They've fixed it. They've come back. This is a much better data set. We can do a lot more with it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's 100%. And we get to this this profiling pretty quickly. So we can say we've got a higher level of confidence in this step. The next step was, as you can see, if you can just see here, what I've done is I've actually looked at almost the groupings of data sets or tables that I've created in Power BI. So in the first step, sorry, and sorry about that. In the first step, we had 1, 2, 3 tables: contract status, contracts, and the DQ profile. That was step number 1. Second step, we started adding, removing all the CDEs and making it cleaner. So we were similar amount of the columns. Now what we've done is we've isolated, as ST was talking about, we've isolated all of the CDEs. And I can show you a data model where we look at the data model. But now can you see we've got by period, start and end date, by industrial city. CR number is for the partner. We have a contract number, which is our uniqueness key. The economic activity is annual rent. But as you can see, that annual rent was a little bit dodgy. So we could use land area and price per square meter. And that was something that JG was able to say when we looked at the reasonableness of price per square meter, it was so much better than what annual rent was all about. So, Rob, to answer your question, is the stepped approach unique or popular? It's a good question. This is, I suppose, something that I've used in terms of just building these elements up, and when I try to provide almost the people that are going to learn how to do it, if I just show them the end result, which is this next one over here, if I just show them the end result, this can actually take some time, where I've now almost got 20 tables that I've got there, and it's taken me a while to get there. But those initial steps, they are the ones that engage discussion with the business and get the stakeholder feedback, so I can complete these elements over here. When we start, we've almost got nothing. So going all the way to getting a complete set of business rules is a bit hard. You almost want to show the business what the state of affairs is, so that they could tell us what the appropriate rules should be. A lot of times we don't know what the rules are, so we've got to, let's get it out, let's get the CDEs out, let's show them and then we build the rules, and then we can do the assessment. And then, as Esty is saying, that's quite a useful approach that we've got. So being able to get the product completeness is very low. We are recommending that you stop using it, and we have to spend a bit more time understanding that product and the contribution as well to the ISTIC code. JG noticed that we've got now another table, which is the contract ISTICs, and we've got, if you saw a little bit further back, we've got, where is it? Sorry. I can't find it at the moment, but we've got a level of per contract, we can have multiple ISTIC codes. So that's come through for the first time that we weren't seeing previously. So if I show you the Power BI again, there it is. Sorry, that's it over there. So can you see now that we've got this high level of contract numbers and contract rows within the profile? If we look at it, notice that the ISTIC codes, the row count is 8,549, and then the contract count is 2,576. And they also confirmed that they just completed a take-on, and so they went from 1,200 to 2,576. Here's JG.
Maybe just a point, Rob, relative to your point, there's another advantage observed through the stepped approach, and that is by going through the stepped approach, what happens is the person who's going to end up being responsible for preparing the actual analytics reports, if they have a chance to be involved in the DQ process, the level of confidence that your visualizer gets through the DQ process, so that they know which elements they can trust or not trust or depend on when it gets to their detailed analytics, it's been a really empowering process. So I almost want to suggest that the step process has got quite a few benefits to parties coming down the line, not just the client. Client can answer things quickly, but the person who's going to be generating the analytics and the visualizations of the analytics just gets such a stronger level of confidence in which elements they can lean on and not. So I just thought that would be another point to just add to Rob's question. Thanks, Hal.
And thanks, JG. And then also what we found by including you in this current step is you can also start to help us with the reasonableness. Okay, so there's a good question here in terms of annual rent, and JG did a great job of saying, well, currently our total annual rent is, I think it was 25 million or whatever it was.
51, but the
51.
Reasonable check says it was understated by 33%.
33%, okay. And so what we would then do is to say, well, where we have the annual rent of 0, the DQ can now come in to say, if we deal with the situation and we suggest a new rental, so as Esty would say, we would call it DQ underscore annual rent, we would then use the standard or the median that JG had calculated in the box plot, and there we had to come down industry, city, industry sector. We had to come down a few levels to get the appropriate distribution. We would take that mean and then call it a DQ annual mean. And when we did that, we almost found something like a 25 million reals improvement of what we were looking at. Rob said, does that help you as well? Almost the data scientist, instead of funging around or managing all of this data at the end, they're getting involved in the DQ side, and they're helping us suggest appropriate numbers or reasonable numbers for that economic activity, which was our critical field. This has got to be the most critical field that we're working on.
Please don't think my question was in any way critiquing the stepped approach. I think it's excellent, absolutely stunning, and benefit for clarity and all involved parties. I was just questioning whether it's something that should be adopted, if not already adopted, by people going through the same
Right.
Situation, circumstance, yeah.
And it was interesting, Rob, because when we spoke to the IT director about the concerns that business had about quality, he said, no, the system's all right. The business aren't sure about the rules. And I get where he was coming from, as he probably had to bring this data in from an old CRM to a new CRM. And there were some questions that the business couldn't answer. And so he had to bring this stuff on. Now, what we can recommend is before you do any migration of data, you should be doing a data quality assessment to see the challenges that you have, because you don't want to bring dirty data from the original system to now dirty data in the new system. You want to be able to protect it as much as possible to ensure that the business rule says, I cannot have null rentals. That's just crazy. That means I'm not charging the person anything. And I cannot have zero rentals. So these are the type of things that if you get it fixed in the new system, you can enforce those rules from the beginning, and you can go forward. So having a view of your quality before you move or migrate data from system A to system B is a very helpful approach. Mohammed, would you agree with that, with all the data quality work that you're doing?
Yeah, this is actually the very important steps that should be done to get the data quality issues and try to make the data quality rules as much as can in order to improve the quality. We have to trust the data, so it has to be high quality. Totally. Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you so much.
I hope that was helpful. We tried to make it a lot more practical and applicable, that you can see that you can put these DQ dashboards together pretty quickly. JG, any comments from your side?
No, Howard, it's just I really so I just want to commend Esty. You've been through one training course, and I just felt that you explained it to us in such a way that was like I even understood. So Esty, I just want to give you a high five and say you really made this come alive for me. So thank you for that.
And what I was impressed about as well is that Esty could now have the discussions with the business, the stakeholders, about what these quality levels should be, with some data to back her discussion. So it was helpful to see that as well, because Esty hasn't been from the beginning, so she's sort of jumped in right at the DQ point, and it's nice to be able to see the people having good engagements and good discussions.
Oh, definitely, because otherwise, without this, to have a conversation with business, with me especially not being there from the start of the project, I don't have all the context in the conversation, but this has something that I can point towards. I can share my screen and say, this is what we found, because it's only the data talking. That's the only thing I can show. So no, it's been very helpful.
Fantastic. A bottle of. Esty deserves a bottle of. ... Fill in the blanks. I think Esty likes the milkshakes, double thick chocolate milkshake, I think, if I remember correctly.
I do like them. I really do like double thick milkshakes.
Fantastic. Okay. Any other questions, comments, observations? Esty, thank you for your time. I appreciate
It's a pleasure.
Questions.
Thank you for the DQ course. I think it's so helpful that it's so very practical. And I think setting up the slides almost to have more detail of the steps, that was very useful for me as well, to go through to make sure, am I understanding per step what is actually happening? So it's been very helpful for me as well.
Excellent. Great. If there are no questions, thanks everyone. Paul, anything from your side? Mr. Bolton?